Okay, we're recording. Let's do chapter 9 Women at Work. More than half of all women in the United States are in the workforce. When contemporary feminist movement first began, the workforce was already more than one-third female. Coming from a working class African American background where most women I knew were in the workforce, I was among the harshest critics of the vision of feminism put forth by reformist thinkers when the movement began, which suggested that work would liberate women from male domination. Excuse me. I'm a little bit under the weather today, so pardon any unevenness in my reading. More than 10 years ago, I wrote in Feminist Theory, From Margin to Center. The emphasis on work as the key to women's liberation led many white feminist activists to suggest women who worked were already liberated. They were in effect saying to the majority of working women, feminist movement is not for you. Most importantly, I knew firsthand that working for low wages did not liberate poor and working class women from male domination. When reformist feminist thinkers from privileged class backgrounds, whose primary agenda was achieving social equality with men of their class, equated work with liberation, they meant high-paying careers. Their vision of work had little relevance for masses of women. Importantly, the aspect of feminist emphasis on work which did affect all women was the demand for equal pay for equal work. Women gained more rights in relation to salaries and positions as a result of feminist protest, but it has not completely eliminated gender discrimination. In many college classrooms today, students both female and male will argue that feminist movement is no longer relevant since women now have equality. They do not even know that on the average, most women still do not get equal pay for equal work, that we are more likely to make 73 cents for every dollar a male makes. We now know that work does not liberate women from male domination. Indeed, there are many high-paid professional women, many rich women who remain in relationships with men where male domination is the norm. Positively, we do know that if a woman has access to economic self-sufficiency, she is more likely to leave a relationship where male domination is the norm when she chooses liberation. She leaves because she can. Lots of women engage feminist thinking, choose liberation, but are economically tied to patriarchal males in ways that make leaving difficult, if not downright impossible. Most women now know what some of us knew when the movement began, that work would not necessarily liberate us, but that this fact does not change the reality that economic self-sufficiency is needed if women are to be liberated. When we talk about economic self-sufficiency as liberating rather than work, we then have to take the next step and talk about what type of work liberates. Clearly, better paying jobs with comfortable time schedules tend to offer the greatest degree of freedom to the worker. Masses of women feel angry because they were encouraged by feminist thinking to believe they would find liberation in the workforce. Mostly they have found that they work long hours at home and long hours at the job. Even before feminist movement encouraged women to feel positive about working outside the home, the needs of a depressed economy were already sanctioning this shift. Sorry, y'all. Sometimes I get random allergies. Oh, gosh. 1 second. All right. Thank you for the blessings. I feel much better now. Just had to blow my nose. Take a little bit of tea as well. Okay. Even before feminist movement encouraged women to feel positive about working outside the home, the needs of a depressed economy were already sanctioning this shift. If contemporary feminist movement had never taken place, masses of women would still have entered the workforce, but it is unlikely that we would have the rights we have had feminists not challenged gender discrimination. Women are wrong to blame feminism for making it so they have to work, which is what many women think. The truth remains that consumer capitalism was the force leading more women into the workforce. Given the depressed economy, white middle class families would be unable to sustain their class status and their lifestyles if women who had once dreamed solely of working as housewives had not chosen to work outside the home. Feminist scholarship has documented that the positive benefits masses of women have gained by entering the workforce have more to do with increased self-esteem and positive participation in community. No matter her class, the woman who stayed at home working as a housewife was often isolated, lonely, and depressed. While most workers do not feel secure at work, whether they are male or female, they do feel part of something larger than themselves. While problems at home cause greater stress and are difficult to solve, those in the workplace are shared by everyone, and the attempt to find solutions is not an isolated one. When men did most of the work, women worked to make home a site of comfort and relaxation for males. Home was relaxing to women only when men and children were not present. When women in the home spend all their time attending to the needs of others, home is a workplace for her, not a site of relaxation, comfort, and pleasure. Work outside the home has been most liberating for women who are single, many of whom live alone. They may or may not be heterosexual. Most women have not been able to find satisfying work, and their participation in the workforce has diminished the quality of their life at home. Groups of highly educated, privileged women, previously unemployed or marginally employed, were able, through feminist changes in job discrimination, to have greater access to work that satisfies, that serves as a base for economic self-sufficiency. Their success has not altered the fate of masses of women. Years ago in feminist theory, from margin to center, I stated, if improving conditions in the workplace for women had been a central agenda for feminist movement in conjunction with efforts to obtain better paying jobs for women and finding jobs for unemployed women of all classes, feminism would have been seen as a movement addressing the concerns of all women. Feminists focused on careerism, getting women employed in high-paying professions, not only alienated masses of women from feminist movement, it also allowed feminist activists to ignore the fact that increased entry of bourgeois women into the workforce was not a sign that women as a group were gaining economic power. Had they looked at the economic situation of poor and working class women, they would have seen the growing problem of unemployment and increased entry of women from all classes into the ranks of the poor. Poverty has become a central women's issue. White supremacist capitalist patriarchal attempts to dismantle the welfare system in our society will deprive poor and indigent women of access to even the most basic necessities of life, shelter, and food. Indeed, a return to patriarchal, male-dominated households where men are providers is the solution offered women by conservative politicians who ignore the reality of mass unemployment for both women and men, and the fact that jobs simply are not there, and that many men do not want to provide economically for women and children, even if they have wages. There is no feminist agenda in place offering women a way out, a way to rethink work. Since the cost of living in our society is high, work does not lead to economic self-sufficiency for most workers, women included. Yet economic self-sufficiency is needed if all women are to be free to choose against male domination, to be fully self-actualized. How am I able to read books without getting in trouble with copyright? So here's a little aside from the reading. Sorry to those listening. this is just something that if I can basically say I'm doing fair use because I'm offering my own sort of addition to the content, because I'm offering commentary as I read, because I'm offering additional like content of like whatever I'm presenting in the time. Those constitute fair use. This is also something that I try to play. Let's say I try to play it safely by finding also books that have already been disseminated freely on PDFs on different websites, um, and books that are older and more popular. Because if I were to be reading a book that I had the ebook for, I had purchased and came out this year or last year, it might be a bit of a different story in terms of what gets caught. Okay, back to reading. Thank you, Spirit Vines. The path to greater economic self-sufficiency will necessarily lead to alternative lifestyles which will run counter to the image of the good life presented to us by white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal mass media. To live fully and well, to do work which enhances self-esteem and self-respect while being paid a living wage, we will need programs of job sharing. Teachers and service workers in all areas will need to be paid more. Women and men who want to stay home and raise children should have wages subsidized by the state, as well as homeschooling programs that will enable them to finish high school and work on graduate degrees at home. With advanced technology, individuals who remain home should be able to study by watching college courses on videos, augmenting this with some period of time spent in classroom settings. If welfare, not warfare, military spending, was sanctioned by our government and by all citizens, legally had access to a year or two of their lives during which they received state aid if they were unable to find a job, then the negative stigma attached to welfare programs would no longer exist. If men had equal access to welfare, then it would no longer carry the stigma of gender. A growing class divide separates masses of poor women from their privileged counterparts. Indeed, much of the class power elite groups of women hold in our society, particularly those who are rich, is gained at the expense of the freedom of other women. Already there are small groups of women with class power working to build bridges through economic programs which provide aid and support to less privileged women. Individual wealthy women, particularly those who inherited wealth, who remain committed to feminist liberation, are developing strategies for participatory economics which show their concern for and solidarity with women who lack class power. Right now, these individuals are a small minority, but their ranks will swell as their work becomes more well known. 30 years ago, contemporary feminists did not foresee the changes that would happen in the world of work in our society. They did not realize that mass unemployment would become more of a norm, that women could prepare themselves for jobs that would simply not be there. They did not foresee the conservative and sometimes liberal assault on welfare, the way that single mothers without money would be blamed for their economic plight and demonized. All these unforeseen realities require visionary feminist thinkers to think anew about the relationship between liberation and work. While much feminist scholarship tells us about the role of women in the workforce today and how it changes their sense of self and their role in the home, we do not have many studies which tell us whether more women working has positively changed male domination. Many men blame women working for unemployment, for their loss of the stable identity being seen as patriarchal providers gave them, even if it was or is only a fiction. An important feminist agenda for the future has to be to realistically inform men about the nature of women and work so that they can see that women in the workforce are not their enemies. Women have been in the workforce for a long time now. Whether we are paid well or receive low wages, many women have not found work to be as meaningful as feminist utopian visions suggested. When women work to make money to consume more rather than to enhance the quality of our lives on all levels, work does not lead to economic self-sufficiency. More money does not mean more freedom if our finances are not used to facilitate well-being. Rethinking the meaning of work is an important task for future feminist movement. Addressing both ways women can leave the ranks of the poor, as well as the strategies they can use to have a good life, even if there is substantial material lack, are vital. If there is substantial material lack, are vital to the success of feminist movement. Early on, feminist movement did not make economic self-sufficiency for women its primary goal. Yet addressing the economic plight of women may ultimately be the feminist platform that draws a collective response. It may well become the place of collective organizing, the common ground, the issue that unites all women. Hello, Lumelo. If you check out my channel, Reading with Elliot, I might have a tab open with it here. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I don't know why I have all this issue with. Anyway, if you check out my channel, Reading with Elliot, you'll see that the other readings are here, as well as my readings of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So, yeah, this is where all the stuff gets uploaded. Thanks again, by the way, for everybody and your support and everything. This has been so far. What I think this chapter, really gets at, obviously, is the issue of class and work, and it's interesting in the context of analyzing where things are at now. Of course, we understand more and more that even the concept that we should be working 40 hours a week in order to supply ourselves with a life worth living or whatever is something that has deeply problematic roots, right? We have our labor consistently exploited, and we shouldn't merely be contending that we have an equal share of the exploitation, right? We should also be trying to figure out more and more ways that through community we can build self-sufficiency, economic self-sufficiency. And that's something that I think Bell Hooks also sort of alludes to with this passage in a certain type of way. But it's more so aimed towards a general audience that still has the understanding that work is the way that we live, the way that we get through things. And so it does a great job of sort of assessing that crowd and the general crowd. But as we develop our thoughts more and more, we can also see, oh yeah, well, maybe just work in general is a concept that has to be deconstructed, as she alludes to, in the sense that we need to start to push for more sort of communistic relations, let's say. And of course, concepts of unionization and women's unions and things like that can be helpful. But of course, unions in and of themselves, they're not like a dogma that constantly works. But yeah, this is great. Finally, we'll read Race and Gender, Chapter 10, and that'll be the end of the stream. Race and gender. No intervention changed the face of American feminism more than the demand that feminist thinkers acknowledge the reality of race and racism. All white women in this nation know that their status is different from that of black women/women of color. They know this from the time they are little girls watching television and seeing only their images, and looking at magazines and seeing only their images. They know that the only reason non-whites are absent/invisible is because they are not white. All white women in this nation know that whiteness is a privileged category. The fact that white females may choose to repress or deny this knowledge does not mean they are ignorant. It means they are in denial. No group of white women understood the differences in their status and that of black women more than the group of politically conscious white females who were active in civil rights struggle. Diaries and memoirs of this period in American history written by white women document this knowledge. Yet many of these individuals moved from civil rights into women's liberation and spearheaded a feminist movement where they suppressed and denied the awareness of difference they had seen and heard articulated firsthand in civil rights struggle. Just because they participated in anti-racist struggle did not mean that they had divested of white supremacy, of notions that they were superior to black females, of more informed, better educated, more suited to lead a movement. In many ways, they were following in the footsteps of their abolitionist ancestors who had demanded that everyone, white women and black people, be given the right to vote, but when faced with the possibility that black males might gain the right to vote while they were denied it on the basis of gender, they chose to ally themselves with men, uniting under the rubric of white supremacy. Contemporary white females, witnessing the militant demand for more rights for black people, chose that moment to demand more rights for themselves. Some of these individuals claim it was working on behalf of civil rights that made them aware of sexism and sexist oppression. Yet if this was the whole picture, one might think their newfound political awareness of difference would have carried over into the way they theorized contemporary feminist movement. They entered the movement erasing and denying difference, not playing race alongside gender, but eliminating race from the picture. Foregrounding gender meant that white women could take center stage, could claim the movement as theirs, even as they called on all women to join. The utopian vision of sisterhood, evoked in a feminist movement that initially did not take racial difference or anti-racist struggles seriously, did not capture the imagination of most black women/women of color. Individual black women who were active in the movement from its inception, for the most part, stayed in their place. When the feminist movement began, racial integration was still rare. Many black people were learning how to interact with whites on the basis of being peers for the first time in their lives. No wonder individual black women choosing feminism were reluctant to introduce their awareness of race. It must have felt so awesome to have white women evoke sisterhood in a world where they had mainly experienced white women as exploiters and oppressors. A younger generation of black females/women of color in the late 70s and early 80s challenged white female racism. Unlike our older black women allies, we had for the most part been educated in predominantly white settings. Most of us had never been in a subordinated position in relation to a white female. Most of us had not been in the workforce. We had never been in our place. We were better positioned to critique racism and white supremacy within the women's movement. Individual white women who had attempted to organize the movement around the banner of common oppression, evoking the notion that women constituted a sexual class/caste, were the most reluctant to acknowledge differences among women. Differences that overshadowed all the common experiences females shared. Race was the most obvious difference. In the 70s, I wrote the first draft of Ain't I a Woman? Black Women in Feminism. I was 19 years old. I had never worked a full-time job. I had come from a racially segregated small town in the South to Stanford University. While I had grown up resisting patriarchal thinking, college was the place where I embraced feminist politics. It was there, as the only black female present in feminist classrooms in consciousness raising, that I began to engage race and gender theoretically. It was there that I began to demand recognition of the way in which racist biases were shaping feminist thinking and call for change. At other locations, individual black women/women of color were making the same critique. In those days, white women who were unwilling to face the reality of racism and racial difference accused us of being traitors by introducing race. Wrongly, they saw us as deflecting focus away from gender. In reality, we were demanding that we look at the status of females realistically, and that realistic understanding serve as the foundation for a real feminist politic. Our intent was not to diminish the vision of sisterhood. We sought to put in place a concrete politics of solidarity that would make genuine sisterhood possible. We knew that there could be no real sisterhood between white women and women of color if white women were not able to divest of white supremacy, if feminist movement were not fundamentally anti-racist. Critical interventions around race did not destroy the women's movement. It became stronger. Breaking through denial about race helped women face the reality of difference on all levels. And we were finally putting in place a movement that did not place the class interests of privileged women, especially white women, over that of all other women. We put in place a vision of sisterhood where all our realities could be spoken. There has been no contemporary movement for social justice where individual participants engaged in the dialectical exchange that occurred among feminist thinkers about race, which led to the rethinking of much feminist theory and practice. The fact that participants in the feminist movement could face critique and challenge while still remaining wholeheartedly committed to a vision of justice, of liberation, is a testament to the movement's strength and power. It shows us that no matter how misguided feminist thinkers have been in the past, the will to change, the will to create the context for struggle and liberation, remains stronger than the need to hold on to wrong beliefs and assumptions. For years, I witnessed the reluctance of white feminist thinkers to acknowledge the importance of race. I witnessed their refusal to divest of white supremacy, their unwillingness to acknowledge that an anti-racist feminist movement was the only political foundation that would make sisterhood be a reality. And I witnessed the revolution in consciousness that occurred as individual women began to break free of denial, to break free of white supremacist thinking. These awesome changes restore my faith in feminist movement and strengthen the solidarity I feel towards all women. Overall, feminist thinking and feminist theory has benefited from all critical interventions on the issue of race. The only problematic arena has been that of translating theory into practice. While individual white women have incorporated an analysis of race into much feminist scholarship, these insights have not had as much impact on the day-to-day relations between white women and women of color. Anti-racist interactions between women are difficult in a society that remains racially segregated. Despite diverse work settings, a vast majority of folks still socialize only with people of their own group. Racism and sexism combined create harmful barriers between women. So far, feminist strategies to change this have not been very useful. Individual white women and women of color who have worked through difficulties to make the space where bonds of love and political solidarity can emerge need to share the methods and strategies that we have successfully employed. Almost no attention is given the relationship between girls of different races. Biased feminist scholarship, which attempts to show that white girls are somehow more vulnerable to sexist conditioning than girls of color, simply perpetuates the white supremacist assumption that white females require and deserve more attention to their concerns and ills than other groups. Indeed, while girls of color may express different behavior than their white counterparts, they are not only internalizing sexist conditioning, they are far more likely to be victimized by sexism in ways that are irreparable. Feminist movement, especially the work of visionary black activists, paved the way for a reconsideration of race and racism that has had positive impact on our society as a whole. Rarely do mainstream social critiques acknowledge this fact. As a feminist theorist who has written extensively about the issue of race and racism within feminist movement, I know that there remains much that needs to be challenged and changed, but it is equally important to celebrate the enormous changes that have occurred. That celebration, understanding our triumphs and using them as models, means that they can become the sound foundation for the building of a mass-based, anti-racist feminist movement. Excellent. As we leave, I want to sort of emphasize that last chapter with regards to applying it to real life issues. I think you all have seen, and this is something that Foreign Man in the Foreign Land is covering in a live stream right now as I stream. There has been a controversy of sorts. Thank you for the $2 donation, Maxwell. A bit of a controversy with regards to the Olympics and a boxer from Algeria competing in the women's boxing category who beat an Italian woman, and a huge controversy created over the idea that she may or may not be trans. Accusations were pointed at her from people like Logan Paul and J.K. Rowling and other well-known transphobic idiots in the public sphere. And they have levied, these critiques that, this woman who there is no evidence is even intersex, let alone transgender, because she fits a specific beauty standard, let's say, is somehow a man, and that this means that she is a man terrorizing other women, beating up other women, in public sport. And so many people have eaten this up because there is still a very racialized idea of what femininity is. The constructs of gender and femininity that we have specifically are tailored towards a white supremacist ideology. Their idea is that women are these dainty, light-skinned, let's say, people with soft faces and all that. And that they must be rescued and saved from, animalistic people and animals and whatnot, which are much more commonly associated with not only black men and brown men, but black women as well. And it is very common for transphobia to affect disproportionately people of black and brown races, much more than it affects people who are white, which, of course, there's so much transphobia against white trans women. But this also is something that is the same tool that is used to be horrendously violent towards black and brown women who are apparently more masculine, taller, broader shoulders. You see these kinds of things were leveraged against someone like Serena Williams throughout her career. And so, books like these, readings like these, understandings like these should lead us to have conversations about what femininity and gender actually is, and what these common everyday concepts of what a man and a woman is, and what's feminine and what's masculine, how much of them are racially coded, and how much of them serve to maintain racial hierarchy and violence against people of different races, as well as violence against people who just simply do not fit those gender stereotypes for any particular reason. And as men, especially, we need to be wary of this, because these are the same things that are wielded against us when we are being, for instance, abused or violently treated by women. We want to talk so much about how women abuse men, and nobody talks about it. But we still want to hold on to this notion that women are soft and effeminate and harmless. This notion of effeminateness as femininity as that, and men are strong and courageous and violent or whatever. This is the same thing that contributes to our own oppression, to our own being mistreated, our own inability to stand up for ourselves. And so every single day of our lives, we have to work with commitments to changing the way that we think about everything, or at least challenging it as much as possible, because there are so many things that we hold on to and take for granted that if we think about for more than 5 minutes, we realize have actually been holding us back and leading to so much destruction around us. So that's what I'll leave you with on this fine day. I hope you have a great Friday. I will see you soon to continue the reading of this book. Thanks to all who have supported, and take care.